Anand, what role does Latin America play in this global portfolio delivery of IT services?
So let me step back and just describe the portfolio concept and where we're seeing buyers go with that before talking about Latin America in particular. So as far as the global portfolio goes, I think as organizations have evolved, most of them started off with doing something in India. Right? Typically, it was one line of business or one business unit doing something in India. Slowly, that started expanding. The same line of business or a new line of business going to a different geography. Most frequently, the Philippines, right? And what these organizations have seen is growth and scale pretty dramatic over the last few years, over the last decade or so, and increasingly a need to integrate and build a portfolio where it's not isolated locations, but all the locations are working together. Right? And fundamentally, I think it's a shift in concept where you're not running a center in India and a center in the Philippines and a center elsewhere, but you're thinking about it from a perspective of given the portfolio of work that I have across IT, business process, contact center, knowledge services, what's the right place to go? How do I build capacity to scale and to support all of these different business units, lines of business, and services in a global manner, right? So that has almost often led to implications around how do I manage concentration risk? Am I doing too much in India, too much in Philippines? How do I mitigate that? It's led to questions around how do I ensure that I'm balancing cost versus risk, right? So India is proven well-established. Philippines is proven well-established. If I'm going to a new geography like a Peru or a Colombia, how do I ensure that I'm taking the right steps to capture the right kind of value that the market offers, but not taking undue amount of risk, right? And all of those questions start to tie together from a global concept, from an overall portfolio concept. And in terms of the role that Latin America has, I think it's in some ways it's clear, but it's more complicated than the role of an India or a Philippines, primarily because India and Philippines is like one country each, right? So there's homogeneity in terms of the kind of risks that you would expect, in terms of the cost structures that you would expect, in terms of the talent pool. There are pockets in each country where there are differences, right? So you would find better voice skills in one part of India versus another, better IT skills in a different part of the country, and so on. But if you look at Latin America, it's a completely heterogeneous mix of countries, heterogeneous mix of talent pools, costs, risk dynamics, government regulations. All of those are very, very different. So on the one hand, Latin America has a clear role in terms of supporting some very clearly identifiable pieces of work, like the bilingual voice piece is very straightforward, which most organizations have already identified. There's opportunities around IT infrastructure management, given the real-time nature of the services there, and also the challenge of finding skilled professionals who can do a graveyard shift in India, right? So that's causing people to think about Latin America as an option. The third is just a risk diversification play. If you have 80% or 90% of your portfolio in India and the Philippines, you naturally start getting concerned about what if one of those countries goes down for whatever reason, right? So you need to have a diversification option which helps support your risk mitigation across that entire portfolio. So there's different ways in which Latin America could fit into the portfolio for a buyer, but how it actually fits and whether it's one stop in Latin America, multiple stops in Latin America, do you need to also start thinking about diversifying within Latin America? All of those are questions that different organizations are taking very different approaches to.
In your view, looking at the top tier IT outsourcing providers in Latin America, are their service delivery capabilities on par with what you see in India and the Philippines?
Specifically with regards to IT services, I think there are definite pockets of strength in Latin America. So Mexico, for example, has very strong capabilities in the ERP skills area. Brazil, for example, has very strong capabilities in the mainframes area, in the server administration, server management, networks kind of area. Chile has it's a smaller geography, smaller talent market, but has deep expertise in certain verticals, right? So there's differences in terms of what you can get within Latin America, but the answer to your question is yes, there are definitely pockets of strength that exist in Latin America that buyers can tap.
Anand, I know you spend a lot of time looking at the Latin American market. In your view, do you think the countries themselves, particularly that top tier set of countries such as Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia. Are they well prepared for the capacity demands that are expected over the next few years?
That's a really good question. So, in terms of what it will take to manage that effectively, if you look at countries that have been successful, if you look at India, Philippines, Czech Republic, for example, all of these in all of these countries, the reason why they have become credible locations, why they have been able to achieve the success that they have had so far, has been because of sustained efforts over several years. So it's not a one-shot marketing program or a one-shot incentive structure or a 2-year effort to get the investor program rolled out. I think it's sustained effort over several years, and that effort needs to adapt to the changing climate, to the changing market dynamics, right? I'm definitely seeing some instances of that. So Costa Rica, for example, has done it really well over the last few years. Chile is starting to make some right moves in that direction. Brazil has started to do that. I'm not really sure how sustained and how programmatic it is, and how much outward facing it is versus being inward facing. So are they trying to really cultivate an ecosystem of service providers who are Brazilian, or are they trying to actively promote Brazil as a destination to the external market? That's kind of been one toss-up which has not been extremely clear. In Argentina, I haven't seen a coherent articulation of the value proposition yet. Colombia is another big market which has lots of potential, which is starting to make the right moves, especially in the last 12 months, has seen some very positive, encouraging steps with Convergys and others setting up centers there. So I'm optimistic about the outlook for Colombia.
In looking at where buyers are, how well are they managing this concentration risk as they deal with this global portfolio approach?
I'd break those challenges down into a couple of different areas. The first is the risk is always an important question, and for most buyers it's a nice question that everybody asks, but nobody seems to have a good answer to. So there's different ways of coming at concentration risk. There's several different ways in which you could slice and dice that problem, but everybody seems to be concerned about it. Everybody seems to be looking for a silver bullet in terms of what's the right threshold. But I think fundamentally it's more about how do you address and mitigate risk. It's not about one threshold that you can set. So that's one issue that most people are still wrestling with as far as the portfolio is concerned. The second issue, which is starting to become important, which hasn't been as big of an issue so far, but will become a bigger issue as we move forward and the industry evolves, is what work should go where. So the reason why it hasn't been such a big issue so far is because if India is the dominant component of your portfolio, you can do most types of work in India, right? If you go to the Philippines, you can do most types of BPO and voice services, not so much IT, but a lot of BPO and voice. So you don't have to think as hard about where do I put my knowledge services, where do I put my investment banking pitch book support, where do I put my equity analyst support, where do I put my credit card fraud analytics support, where do I put my voice support for high value consumers versus local consumers or lower value consumers, right? So as people start to evolve a more diversified portfolio of locations, that question of what work goes where and being able to address that effectively will become much more important, and especially in terms of tying all the different locations together. So it's not just about one location being the core or the center for one type of service. It's about how do all of those different locations contribute to delivering that service. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we've seen these words being bandied about a fair bit in the industry in terms of hubs, spokes, and so on. But I think we're starting to see come to a point where the industry is questioning what is a hub really, what is a spoke really, what does a center of excellence really mean, and how do you integrate all of those themes into a portfolio concept. Okay. So that's one. And I think finally, as far as Latin America is concerned, solving for the issue of where in Latin America will continue to be perplexing and challenging for most buyers.
Anand, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.